special guest on this Thursday morning, Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, most recently ambassador to Japan. Before that, of course, two-term mayor of Chicago. Before that, chief of staff to President Obama. Before that, longtime member of Congress. Before that, political director in the Clinton White House. Basically, done everything, including being an investment banker. And I'm very glad to have you join me, Mr. Ambassador. Where do I find you today?
In Montana.
Good place to relax. Before I get to the serious stuff, I want to ask what your reaction was when you learned a new pope was from Chicago.
Well, as all good Jewish boys, I was proud to know that his mother was a fan of the Chicago Cubs.
Oh, but he's a White Sox fan.
That's my point. Like, his mother is the most important in that process.
I guess.
On a serious note, I actually was communicating this week with Cardinal Supich, who's on his way to Hiroshima. He's from Chicago, obviously, on his way. And we were talking, and I was talking about the Pope and how much hope and how much pride the people of the city of Chicago have in a hometown kid that's done well.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I'm Roman Catholic. I'm just a little bit younger than he is. I want to know what's in his album collection. Did he watch Laugh-In? I just want to know the cultural stuff, right? So if you see him, tell him he's got an interview over here. Serious stuff. What is the number one external existential threat to the United States?
Well, you say that. I would say external, I actually think is internal. And I say that, I wrote a piece for the Washington Post when I was wrapping up being ambassador, what I learned about China and the region, what I learned about Japan, and being away from America, what I also learned about America, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I actually think the biggest challenge externally is if we're not strong at home, and I don't mean in the kumbaya sense, although that's a portion of it, we can't actually deal and deter all the external threats. So I actually do believe that the biggest external threat we have is at home, which is the strength and the capacity for us to both be politically, economically, and strategically successful in calling on all of America's strengths. So I actually think
I'll come back around to the internal divisions in the country, but okay. I was wondering if you would say China. Do you think China's our biggest threat?
There's no doubt, because I think when Xi becomes president and premier, China goes from being a strategic competitor to a strategic adversary. We were late to realizing the shift in mindset by China. They were no longer, there's a lot that goes into this from the 2008 financial meltdown, et cetera. There's a lot of components to break apart on that analysis. But Xi makes a fundamental change, not only about China, but in the relationship with the United States. And we were hope overcame reason in the sense of understanding that China wasn't not only playing by the rules, but they made a shift strategically, and we were late to coming to the understanding. I think he actually gave us a wake-up call, and had he stayed silent or more oblique, we would have lost a decade when we lost really closer to half a decade, maybe just a tad more. And now we're aware of it. I'm not sure we're doing everything to meet it.
President Obama began what is called the pivot to Asia. Donald Trump has continued it. What do you make about that redeployment of American military strength in numbers and in capacity to the Pacific?
I happen to think it's very important militarily. I happen to think our multiplier, we can get into this, is making sure that Japan, Korea, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, India, the Philippines, all our allies are aligned and pulling in the same direction, both on economic deterrence and on strategic and military deterrence. I don't think, as a father of two kids in the Navy, one full-time and one reserve, I don't think it's only about our military. Our economic power, take an example of export controls on semiconductors. They're effective because Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and the Dutch all lined up with the United States shoulder to shoulder. If you think you're going to do it by yourself, you're going to be the odd man out. There's basic pivot here. Our goal is to isolate the isolator China. China's goal is to isolate us. And I think that we have to use our economic strength, our political strength, and our strategic strength to our advantage. Look, even countries that aren't quote unquote allies in the region, they do not want an undeterred, unhinged China. They welcomed America as the counterpoint. And so to me, that's the key thing, and to build on that across each of the spectrums or each of the component parts.
Well, I love the fact you got kids in the Navy. I had a son in the Navy who passed in the hallway with your son in naval
Oh,
intelligence. He just retired about 6 months ago. And then I have a son in law still on active duty. And so I'm always hearing about our Pacific deployments. You know about then how important it is that we keep a robust submarine and carrier fleet out there. Do you think we're building for a future to face China, or do we need to rethink strategically?
well, first of all, you always have to think constantly strategically. If you basically have a consensus, there should always be a group of people questioning the consensus. Now, there was a great story in the Wall Street Journal this week. I say great because it underscores something I've been advocating, wrote about when I was ambassador, which is we are not building the Navy and the capacity from submarines to other things, other parts of the Navy fast enough, and the supplies we need fast enough. And that means we got to call on the strengths of our allies, which is I advocate for repairs of the Seventh Fleet that's based out of Japan, to be repaired in Japan, keep them in theater, and use the United States power and capacity industrial to build new and additional, and not clog up the system with repair work, which we're way behind on. Second is we have the only part of the world where we have an aircraft carrier permanently based is in Japan in the Indo-Pacific. There's got to be a potential to call on the other parts of both the Navy, the Marines, and the Air Force in different ways to think strategically, think about the challenges, and not just Taiwan. You have the Philippines, a sovereign nation and a treaty ally, and the South China Sea is 14% of the world's entire fish catch. 40% of the GDP of the world goes through those waters. And China is trying to change the facts for both for Philippines, Vietnam, and other countries that surround the South China Sea. And so you have to think of it from that strategy as well. The best offense is an effective, credible deterrence.
I agree. That's Teddy Roosevelt to Ronald Reagan to the present day. Now, you may have overlapped with Admiral Paparo, whom I have not met, but I love the fact he said we have to make the Taiwan Strait be a hellscape if China attempts to cross it in force. Do you agree with the Admiral?
Well, Poppy is his code name, and I agree with whatever Sam says, I take as face value. He's a very smart and very strategic thinker, as his predecessor, the long John Aquilino was. I think they no doubt had the part of the credibility of the deterrence on the military side is not only the United States, not only Taiwan, but our allies being part of that and making sure that it is since China has never ever fought a Navy war or a naval led military effort, that they understand the command of the seas is something the United States and Japan and other countries and Australia understand, and we will make it so hard to think about it. That credibility of doubt creates its own deterrence.
I agree with that. Let's pause it right there. I spoke to Rahm Emanuel for an hour between 1 and 2 o'clock Eastern Time. I'm going to play parts in this hour, next hour, and the third hour. It's already all posted at YouTube if you want to hear the entire conversation. Indeed, we do get to the nuclear triad. Let me do, however, I'm not public radio. I have sponsors. I got to serve my sponsors. I'm going to serve Consumer Cellular right now, 1-800-411-4454. And if you call Consumer Cellular or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh, you'll be better off at the end of the call. If you call 1-800-411-4454, you'll have to press one button from a menu, and then you'll be talking to a real live person here in the United States. Their call centers are all in the United States, and they are designed to provide you savings without losing service. You don't have to sacrifice service for savings or savings for service. You can have both, and you don't have to buy more data than you need. You probably don't need unlimited data if you're over 50. They target the over 50 demo, many of whom only need 5 gigs or 10 gigs a month. But if you do want, for a limited time, if you do want unlimited data, You can get 2 lines, not one, for $60 a month. Keep your old numbers, keep your old data, keep your old contacts, keep it all, or get a new device. Up to you. Get a second phone if you want one. But go to consumercellular.com/Hugh or call 1-800-411-4454. Use my code HUGH25 and get $5 off each of your first 5 monthly bills. When you make the switch to Consumer Cellular, you will save money and you will thank me for having done so. 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. Noah Rothman is the senior political writer for National Review. He joins me once a week. Noah, how is your week going?
It's going lovely, Hugh. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Good. I just spent an hour with Rahm Emanuel. Ambassador Emanuel is in Montana, and we did an hour-long conversation on everything from China and Japan to the state of the Navy to redistricting to whether or not a Jew can win the presidency for the Democrats to, well, you name it, we covered it. It's an hour. Do you think he's a formidable candidate, given that he's been ambassador, mayor for 8 years, chief of staff in the White House, political director in the White House, congressman? What do you think?
Yeah, I do. I actually do. I think that to the extent that lanes actually exist, lanes is kind of a fraught way to think about primary politics. But in other words, candidates can occupy a particular can evince qualities that appeal to certain demographics within the party. And the progressive lane, such as it is going to be glutted with people who are trying to affect AOC's approach to politics. Mamdani, Elizabeth Warren, those are the loudest voices in the party. There are not many who are going to be taking the Joe Biden approach in 2020, which was to subtly but firmly tell the progressives where they have gone off the reservation, where they have no longer represent the American mainstream. And Rahm Emanuel had a reputation for doing that when he was both Chicago mayor and as a congressman. When he was in charge of the DCCC in 2006, his approach to recruiting candidates was to find people with military backgrounds, professionals, individuals who reflected the broader mainstream of American society, to try to get the Democratic Party's image away from the notion that it was the Cindy Sheehan party, the anti-war party. That worked really well for Rahm Emanuel, and that approach is getting a second look from some figures within the DCCC. Andrew Kaczynski over at CNN reported as much recently. And so there is definitely an appetite for Rahm Emanuelism within the party. It's not reflected in the base. It's not reflected in the activist
In the
class.
hour that we covered, we spent most of the time on international security, national security stuff, and he admitted he doesn't know what he needs to know on the nuclear triad, so that's another triad win. I'm trying to always bring the triad to people's
Everybody should know
attention.
the answer to this question, Hugh, by now.
Yeah,
The looming tower,
but he knows
the nuclear
that it's a
triad.
triad. He just doesn't know which part is most important. But he did say boys should not be in girls' sports, but that's also not what we should be emphasizing. He did say he's open to school choice. He did say that Israel is our ally and that the pod bros who say table stakes or no military sales to Israel are wrong and that it's a bilateral relationship. He said some very non-left-wing things, but he also defended redistricting viciously every 10 years, but attacked Texas for doing it now. So he is trying to thread that lane. I think it might work. What about the Jewish part?
Well, I'm not an expert on the Emanuel family, very powerful family. I think they have Israeli relations. I think their father is Israeli.
Oh,
Could be
yes,
wrong.
he fought in the War of Independence.
Okay, so there you go. Kind of hard to disavow that relationship. And it's one that he should wrap his hands around. It's not a liability among the voters he's attempting to appeal to in a Democratic primary. It's a huge liability among the activist class. He should know right up front that he's not going to make any friends on that side of the aisle, and he should use it to his advantage. He's not going to win the Democratic Party nomination by appealing to independents and centrists and Republicans. But he could win the party nomination by appealing to its authorities, the establishmentarian wing of the Democratic Party, which is very cowed right now, very insecure, and isn't speaking up very loudly, but still has a lot of influence among the donor class, and that resonates in the early primary states. He has
What
a narrow
surprised
path,
me
I
the
would say.
most, I asked him about the border. He said there's a consensus now in the country on the border. We are all against illegal immigration. We need to fix the people who are here and come up. And, Democrats come up with a reasonable bill, it'll pass. Just produce it. And he said, why blame the Democrats? I said, because you can do it. If you come up with a reasonable bill, one that actually rewards people who work hard and haven't gotten in trouble and ups enforcement against criminals, the Republicans will put their arms around it. Do you agree with me?
Possibly. Possibly. It depends on what the language of that bill is. But listen, the first step towards getting Republicans to consent to any sort of immigration legislation was to close the border. And the border has been closed. Donald Trump has closed it. Now, that's not a permanent condition. This is a garden. It requires continual tending. But it is nevertheless the first step towards the kind of reforms that Democrats have long wanted to see and that Republicans occasionally talk themselves into. I don't think we're in that kind of environment right now, so I think that there would be no legislative appetite for something like immigration reform legislation. But nevertheless, if you could see a future in which the Democratic Party, having accepted the inevitability, or rather accepted at least the public's appetite for a closed border and no longer rages against it in order to appease very unrepresentative activist groups, most of whom are inside the Beltway and nowhere else. I think that consensus has probably found its way inside it burrowed itself into Democratic skulls such to the point that they're no longer raging against it. But I don't know if that's a permanent condition. The activist class is very persuasive.
If I were king of the forest, not queen, not duke, not earl, I would finish the wall, and then I would say, we're going to regularize everyone who's been here and has not gotten in trouble with the law, and you can stay until you get in trouble with the law, but you will never be a citizen. That's the Hugh Hewitt sweet spot. What's Noah Rothman think about that? That's last question.
That's possible. No pathway to citizenship might be something that would appease Republican hardliners on immigration. But the Overton window has shifted on the right. The right no longer believes that it has to accept half a loaf on this, especially immigration hawks who perceive not just illegal immigration, but legal immigration, visa holders, H-1, H-1-2s, H-1Bs. They don't believe that those are necessarily individuals that we have to accept into the American firmament either. And they're gonna weigh as heavily on Republican politics as progressive activists weigh on Democratic politics. The activist class.
That's why it's got to build from the center out. It's got to come from the center out. And
where's the centrist activists? That such a thing as an anathema. It's an oxymoron. It doesn't exist. So
I'll give you a surprise name: Donald Trump. Nixon to China. Donald Trump can put it forward. Noah C. Rothman on X. Thank you for joining me, Noah. Always read him. Follow him on X at Noah C. Rothman. Now, let me tell you something Andrew Del Rey sent me yesterday. Andrew Del Rey is half of andrewandtodd.com. They are lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They will lend you money to buy a house anywhere in the United States. 888-888-1172. They underwrite the loan because Sierra Pacific Mortgage is actually the bank that lends you the money. They do it soup to nuts. They'll help everyone, no matter who you are or where you're living. Yesterday, he said rates hit a low for 2025 yesterday. He sent that to me yesterday. So if you've been waiting for rates to drop, rates hit a low for this year yesterday. That doesn't mean the rate you'll get right now will be the rate you'll have forever. I think rates are going to continue to go down slowly over the next couple of years. You can always refinance, but get started now and lock in the lowest rate that's been available since in 2025 and go about doing the move that you have to do because your company's moved you or the military has moved you or you just simply want to change states from California to anywhere else. Call andrewandtodd.com at 888-888-1172. If you're a veteran, no money down. If you're a first-time home buyer, you can use the FHA program for a lower down payment. If you're a senior citizen and you need to get some money out of your house, 888-888-1172. andrewandtodd.com. It's easier to go over to their website, andrewandtodd.com, and answer a couple of questions. They'll get right back to you. But you can call them at 888-888-1172. Jonathan Williams is president and chief economist at the American Legislative Exchange Council, great sponsor of the program. We find him today at the State Up North at his home campus of Norwood University. And we don't have to say what state it's in, Jonathan, but what is a Great Lakes Regional Legislator Academy?
Well, hey, Hugh, and yeah, greetings from the campus in Northwood. It's a great day to be up in Michigan to talk with a lot of great free market leaders from all over the region. And it's really, we got folks from 5 or 6 different states here exploring conservative and free market policy ideas that will continue to move the Midwest in the right direction. Lots of great ideas, whether it's from Ohio, Indiana, and yes, Michigan. Hugh, there's some good things to be had. And you know what? Competition at the end of the day is a very healthy thing, whether in business or in this case, certainly in government.
So the one thing the Great Lakes state have, all of them, is water. And water increasingly becomes valuable as the world industrializes. Do they realize that? Do they stick to the water compact?
No, I think that's absolutely an issue. I know we have Speaker Matt Hall, our good friend from Michigan, here with us on site. He spoke to us at lunch, and he was out at the White House with President Trump and Governor Whitmer. If you remember that, the famous meeting there that happened earlier this
Yes.
year, and a lot of that was around Michigan water issues, and so that is absolutely a key element of things. But also, in addition to that, right? I mean, a lot of the electricity demand issues, the shared grid that a lot of the states have when it comes to energy security and of course many of the other economic issues like taxes and jobs. I mean, just last couple of weeks, as you know, we were in Indianapolis for the ALEC annual meeting. I interviewed Governor Braun there. We had Vivek Ramaswamy there. Lots of good competitive governors this day and age in the Midwest again. It kind of reminds me of the days of John Engler and Tommy Thompson and some of those great governors from the 90s, where I think a lot of the policy innovation is going to once again happen in the Midwest, Hugh.
The region needs it, the country needs it. Let's quickly switch to a national issue, the Medicaid reforms in the One Big Beautiful Bill. You wrote about it this week. Are they popular?
I think when it's unpacked and it's described properly, absolutely. I mean, you get the liberal media headlines, Hugh, that are describing this as a cut. I had a reporter reach out to me recently asking me what I thought about these large Medicaid cuts to the states, what that's going to mean for state budgets. And I said, well, wait a minute, can you help me understand that? Please explain what kind of Medicaid cuts you're talking about. And it was like a lot of gibberish there that they couldn't actually articulate whatsoever what kind of cuts there will be. And of course, that's the reality of it, is what Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune and President Trump did in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was to say, let's root out the waste, fraud, and abuse. Let's make sure that Medicaid funding is available for those who really need it as a social safety net program. And let's do some common sense things that actually poll at 80 or 90%, such as work requirements for able-bodied working age men with no kids who all they need to do under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, 20 hours a week of work or volunteering to say, let's have a stake in the game. And if you want to keep your Medicaid, you can keep your Medicaid, but you've got to go through those basic requirements.
I think that is popular. It makes common sense. Let's turn now to something I didn't know. I was long against Chevron deference. It's dead now, but it's not dead in all the states. I got your newsletter. Missouri has decided to follow the ALEC model and eliminate judicial deference to state agency decisions. How many states have done this? Because this is wildly important at the federal level, but I didn't realize states were doing it.
That's right. I mean, I think we're growing in quantity every single month there this year, Hugh. And I think we're up towards double digits amount of states that have worked on our ALEC model to get rid of that Chevron deference, because a lot of folks forgot that, yes, it was fixed at the federal level with Loper Bright, but at the state court level, it still needs to be addressed. And red states and blue states alike have come to ALEC for policy guidance and are introducing it in states across the country. So we had Senator Schroer and we had Representative Keithley and Governor Kehoe working on this. We are very glad to honor them as our policy champions. Most recently, they're on the ALEC website, and we hope that many other states consider this if they didn't consider it in 2025.
I hope everyone who's listening or watching on the Salem News Channel goes and orders alec.org/Hugh. You will sign up for the ALEC weekly newsletter, and you would find out, for example, that North Carolina this week overrode Governor Stein's veto, and now there's a Rhines Act in North Carolina. 45 seconds, Jonathan Williams. What's that require?
Well, it's another common sense idea that says if a rule or regulation costs over, in this case, $4 million a year, it needs the approval of the legislature to go forward. The legislature needs to have that check and balance on the administrative state, unaccountable bureaucrats. And in the case of North Carolina, it was a massive bipartisan vote of the legislature led by Speaker Hall and Leader Berger there in the Senate to override the governor's veto. I have no idea why he would veto something that common sense to start with, but it's another another great step in the right direction for North Carolina.
ALEC is powering so many reforms. You ought to stay on top of what they are doing. Go to alec.org/Hugh and sign up for their weekly newsletter, alec.org/Hugh. The State of the States newsletter is something you ought to read every single week. Thank you, Jonathan. I hope you get to visit Ohio on this trip. You've been to Indiana and Michigan. You got to go to the Buckeye State. Coming up, part 2 of my interview with Rahm Emanuel, former ambassador to Japan, two-time mayor of Chicago, chief of staff to President Obama, political director for President Clinton, longtime member of Congress, and probably a Democratic presidential candidate. Here is part 2. Do you believe Xi is ever going to loosen his grip on that country, Ambassador Emanuel, because he is different from previous Chinese leaders?
Look, I mean, they're shades of each other. He has taken it to a higher level. There is no way he will loosen his grip because of his own sense of protests, whether they were in Hong Kong or when there was housing protests in China itself, in the mainland. There's no way he will loosen his grip. And look, follow the money. He has spent more on domestic security than he has on his own military security and the projection of that power. That tells you there's 3 senses of vulnerability in China historically. One around food, one around energy, and the third is around the Chinese people. They live in constant fear of the Chinese people. That is one of their big insecurities. And so therefore there's, based on history and based on culture, no way will the Chinese Communist Party under Xi loosen their grip and control. And I think if you think about COVID, it used to be if you wanted to get rid of a political opponent, or you send them away. The iPhone or the phone, mobile phone, they have now realized how to bring the gulag to you. You can't get on a bus. You can't go shopping. You can't go to the grocery. You can't leave your neighborhood. You can't leave $5 because they know where you are. So the concept, like Russia or the Soviet Union, where you used to send a political dissident to Siberia, the Siberia now comes to you.
That's very well put, and I agree with that. Do you think most Americans understand the nature of the Chinese political system and indeed Chinese espionage in the United States?
I don't think most Americans, and I don't think most of the political class either. So I wouldn't distinguish the Americans. I think our political class on both parties, both things have, we give you an example. Political class, I'm guilty of this also. Sometimes it's used the Cold War metaphor. It's actually wrong, and it leads to wrong conclusions. What do I mean? When we had a Cold War with the Soviet Union, well, Soviet Union and Russia specifically as the anchor of the Soviet Union, the Warsaw Pact, was maybe 7% of the world GDP. We had zero trade. Here we have over $1 trillion of trade. China is close to 20% of the world's GDP, and it is not a military conflict alone. Xi has made sure that the future of the United States battle with China is going to be on science and technology. Why I oppose what President Trump is doing, one of the reasons, not the only reason, is because while they're investing in quantum, while they're investing in AI, while they're investing in biotech, we are cutting our investments in the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation, DARPA, and all the other aspects that make up America's scientific and technological leadership. It is a unilateral disarmament by the United States of America, led by President Trump. That is the war that Xi is getting ready for, and we need to play to our strengths in the scientific and technological area, and we are not doing it with the universities system and college system that the United States has built up post-World War II.
Oh, Mr. Ambassador, up front, I tell people interviews are not debates, so I just want to hear your answers, and I won't debate you on them. But on that point, we are also falling behind in the AI race because we don't have enough of an electrical base. We don't have enough power in the United States, and renewables don't provide it. They're uncertain. Do we need small modular reactors?
Yeah. We can have a debate. This is I thought this was going to be like a Jewish home for dinner. We're going to scream at each other. That's how we be with each other. But go ahead.
Okay, well, tell me about nuclear reactors. Are you in favor of them?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm in favor of. I was an advocate when I was ambassador to Japan for Japan expanding their opening the closed nuclear facilities post Fukushima. I want the United States to be a leader in what is called the small medium reactor SMR field. There's about 7 companies from NewScale to the one, the Hitachi, GE, to the Westinghouse. And now I'm getting into a problem because I'm starting to name, and I shouldn't leave any off. So Bill Gates has a great company out in Wyoming that's starting a plant. There's a story today about a new thing in Idaho. So my view is we should let 1,000 flowers bloom, test which technology works. I happen to think if you look around the corner, what's going to happen, which will be different, is the industrial large users will come off the grid and become self-sufficient. The rest of the grid system will go to a consumer retail-based type of energy. And the SMR as a piece of the solution, not only for climate change, but for energy independence, will be a key component. I disagree with you in that sense that the renewables will be a strong component, but what they need is the battery storage, which America is also a leader in, and the capacity to keep that retail energy independent electrical system working. And then the biggest thing, which is a win-win for the United States, which is redoing the electric grid to support this type of investment. And that means training men and women to be Illinois International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, because we are short workers to build the grid system, which is one of the linchpin. And this gets to your first question. If we don't invest in America's electrical grid, not that I don't care about China, but that's like a domestic internal piece that will hold America back from its great leadership and potential.
Okay, so he's right there. Let's pause it. We'll play part 3 at the start of hour 2 of today. It's an hour-long interview. It's posted on my YouTube channel over at Hugh Hewitt YouTube if you want to watch it all. I want to remind you right now that Texas, it's my penultimate day asking you for money to help the Hill Country in Texas. It's really money for Food for the Poor, which is sponsoring the drive to bring relief to those people in Texas. Now, the Texas state legislators who fled to Illinois, and I'm going to talk with Rahm Emanuel about these theater kids who are putting on a show, they should be legislating a relief bill that the Senate will pass and the House can't pass without the members of the Texas delegation. In the meantime, I'm counting on this audience to step up, as Ed Raines says.
We got a very loyal donor base, and some of you are listening. Thank you. And for those that are interested, we do an awful lot. We are interdenominational. We always have been. And so we work with a huge number of churches, but also just faith-based individuals and organizations. There's a tremendous network out there doing incredible work.
So please give them a call, 855-359-4673. $50, $100. We got a $1,000 contribution here. 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. Or the banner Help Texas at the top of HughHewitt.com. I want to take a moment to tell you about WebRoot. I see they have television ads out now, but I am a radio person and a television person, so you get to see and hear me talk to you about WebRoot. Everybody needs cybersecurity. Everybody does. It's just a question of where you're going to get it from. Every second or two, an identity is stolen in the United States. So you need some kind of protection. They have a couple of different offerings. They have WebRoot Total Protection or WebRoot Essentials. Which one is best for you? Go to webroot.com/Hewitt. Right now it's 50% off. You'll get a bunch of different things like a web threat shield to block bad websites before you even click on them. You can get a VPN for up to 10 devices and identities. You can protect up your own identity and 5 family members, 5 devices, cover the whole family as well. You get a system optimizer, identity protection with advanced dark web monitoring. They're on the dark web, they're watching. You get rapid credit alerts, up to $1 million in reimbursement for stolen funds. And WebRoot includes a VPN for up to 10 devices with unlimited cloud backup. Don't wait. Learn from our experience. We had ransomware here about 10 years ago, and we have a pretty good system. We needed a better one, and we put one in. Get 50% off WebRoot Total Protection now or WebRoot Essentials now by going to webroot.com/Hewitt. That's webroot.com/Hewitt. Live a better digital life with WebRoot. And don't forget, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I'm going to do what I do in the first hour of every show, which is take my Relief Factor, which I do every day on the air and on the weekend off the air, usually in the first hour of the program. And it's like carrying curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. And the way I do it, the reason I do it, is I go often and out and far with myself, with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, right now with grandkids up hill and dale. Today we didn't do that. Today we just went to a big carb-loading breakfast because we got a long walk tomorrow with the kiddos, and I'm looking forward to it. But big carb doesn't mean forget your Relief Factor. In fact, looking ahead to tomorrow and the weekend warrior stuff, make sure you take your Relief Factor. Call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. That's the easiest way to get started. Or you can go online. Ask them for the starter pack, by the way, $19.95 for 3 weeks. You take 3 packets a day on the first week, 2 packets a day on the second week, 1 packet a day on the third week. The reason is you want to build up in your body the natural supplements like carrying curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Then you can also go online and get that starter pack if you visit their website at relieffactor.com. Look for the starter pack, $19.95 for 3 weeks, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Coming up next hour, more of Rahm Emanuel. Dwayne is busy typing away at the transcript, which has got a lot of amazing stuff in it. Interesting conversation. He's looking for that center-left lane in the Democratic primary, as Noah Rothman said. We'll start the hour with him. We'll include Philip Balboni. We'll get an update on what Israel has decided to do from Josh Kroshauer. A lot ahead on the Hugh Hewitt Show. A couple hours ago, I caught up with Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, former Chief of Staff to President Obama, former 2-term mayor of Chicago, former political director for Bill Clinton when he was president, former congressman from Illinois, and he ran the DCCC. He knows a lot of stuff. He joined me for an hour. Here is part 3 of that interview. 100% agreement. Last China question. Are you familiar with the case of Jimmy Lai?
This is definitely not a Jewish meal for an agreement. So I just want to start that right there.
I'll get to it. We'll get to that stuff. But are you familiar with Jimmy Lai and solitary confinement in Hong Kong because Xi is afraid of him?
Yeah.
President Trump and Secretary Rubio have assured me on this show they're working to get him out. Do you think they'll get him out, or is Xi just going to say no forever?
Look, this is I would say, an uneducated guess. They will get him out, but the price is going to be one that's going to be painful. And like in everything of governing, you got a list of about 100 things. Is it number 99 or is it number 9? What are the pieces? Where does getting him out sit against fentanyl, against industrial, against chips, against Taiwan? So the list is long, and I can't speak to the administration's. Where does you tell me where that they put his freedom on their list of musts, and where does it rank? And I'll tell you whether I'm optimistic or pessimistic.
They tell me it's near the top, but that's a vague assurance. Let's move on. But you're right. Yeah. It depends on where it is on the list. Definitely not the Jewish dinner. Let's get there. Should we allow allies like South Korea and Japan to build warships for us? Not just repair and maintain them, as you pointed out, we could do in Japan tomorrow, but build them for us against the Jones Act, for example.
Yes, but before I get my hate mail, let me fill out the yes part.
Yeah, you're going to.
Yeah. You could find a way that the United States and Japan, where I'm more familiar, Japan builds the hull. And the United States then brings the hull to the United States and customizes the Aegis class. And Japan does their own Aegis their way. But the hull production, which would allow you to multiply the production of the Aegis, I'm just using that as one example, could be a joint project. I actually think one of the things you could do with Japan is we will do more of the 7th Fleet maintenance there, but we need Mitsubishi or Kawasaki to purchase one of the shipyards in the United States and open up a shipyard here and start the production. Because their capability of on time and on budget versus the United States is junior varsity versus NBA. So
Why is that, Ambassador?
Look, I mean, I wrote about this, so I want to give a point out to something. The United States were all responsible for both parties, both political class and commercial class, for allowing our military-industrial capacity to shrivel over the years post-Cold War. We overshot the runway from 55 companies to 5 big ones. We didn't get efficiency. We got rewarding, over budget, and behind schedule. No other business professional, besides the military industrial complexes of the United States, have we rewarded year in and year out failure. So in my view, we've talked about it. Ban for 7 years all corporate stock buyback until they fix on time and on budget. And Japan does that. I went personally with Del Toro, the former Secretary of Navy, to see Mitsubishi production, their capacity. They could tell you 3 years from now which screw will be put in which base on what hour of the Tuesday of the 3rd week of November. And they've never been behind budget or behind schedule in the way that the United States has. Nowhere close. Now there's a lot of cultural pieces. And so my view, you need to take a 2x4 to the corporate suite. And I'll give you 2 examples. And I wrote about this in Bloomberg. Raytheon and Lockheed in the last 3 years did $19 billion in stock buybacks and collectively $4 billion in nuke production and capital expenditure. 19 versus 4, and you and I have spent the first 15 minutes talking about China, which is a naval, an aerial, and missile theater versus a land theater in Europe. And nobody's going to say, time out, we're not ready for the Taiwan Straits or the South China Sea. They're investing in their potential and where they think the conflict's going to be. We are hamstrung by a broken system that we have rewarded the worst behaviors. And there's only one way to do it: cold turkey it. You want to focus the corporation and the leadership of those corporations in fixing what is broken. Don't talk to me, oh, we need more certainty. Budgets for defenses are going up. That you know. No corporate stock buyback to enrich the CEOs in the corporate suite until you fix this problem for the American people. And that will wake them up.
Music to my ears. Now, do you think carriers, and this is important if you ever decide to run for and are successful being president, do you think carriers are on the edge of becoming obsolete over the next 20 to 25 years and we're going to be a submersible Navy?
All right, I'm going to give you, I've actually crazily started to read about this and educate. I actually think the short answer is no, but I would expand what carriers are. And what I mean by that is we have the potential now for both unmanned and other type of drone capacity to take off vertically. So you could take a barge, put 5 of those capacities on a barge, and that becomes an aircraft carrier. So you have to change your concept. And here's what I'm thinking about. You can now have 50 aircraft carriers in the South China Sea or in the Indo-Pacific theater, not just the Ronald Reagan, not just the George Washington, not just the Abraham Lincoln when they're there. Massively expand your aircraft carriers, and that goes to America's strength, and all of a sudden makes China's investments more vulnerable and more weak. Because if you don't give them a singular target, but massively expand what the target is and massively expand what an aircraft carrier is for the 21st century, you just have rethought and used and played to America's strengths, China's vulnerability, and our capacity to change the asymmetrical warfare today.
You just spent 4 years in Japan that is transitioning from post-World War II Japan to... What's that?
I said, don't you want to disagree?
We agree. Absolutely. And I've got carrier people in the family, and they tell me I'm a little bit, we need the big ones, and I understand that, but they're going to be like battleships in World War II before long in the age of hypersonic missiles. I want to know what you saw in the Japan attitude? Have the Japanese embraced their need to be a war-fighting nation again?
So I'm sensitive to the Japanese public. So what I would say is they absolutely understand the world is different today. They absolutely understand that they have a role to play in meeting that challenge. And they have gone from a pacifist to investment in the deterrence. Do I say go into a militaristic based on history, et cetera, and the post-World War II culture? No. But they're going from the ninth defense budget in the world, the ninth largest, to the third largest defense budget. And they're acquiring capabilities, like counter-strike capabilities, that nobody would have thought of on those two things. And that goes to Prime Minister Kishida, the leaders of the LDP. But that consensus is actually shared by the entire country, mainly because of knowing that they can't just rely on the United States. And they also have a lot of security concerns about what China's doing, not just in China, but how they are also starting to do things around the Senkaku Islands, around the Okinawa Island chains, and in and around the Sea of Japan that they have never done before. So Japan understands world's different, got to change.
Now, about Taiwan, let's pause it right there. I'll come back and play part 4 at the start of the next hour, maybe a little bit at the bottom of the hour. I do want to remind you we are running a campaign, as is Food for the Poor, the sponsor of it. Help Texas banner is over at the top of HughHewitt.com. Please be generous. It's my second to last day of asking you to call 855-359-4673, 855-359-4673. You've been intending to help the people of the Hill Country. You know that 136 lives were lost. You know that entire villages were destroyed along those rivers. You know what happened, and you want to help. Texas has Democrats have fled the state, so they can't pass their own relief bill, but private people are stepping up with contributions that are totally tax deductible. Go to helptexas@HughHewitt.com or call 855-359-4673. $50 or $5,000, anything in between. Thank you for helping these people out. As you know, if you've been listening to my interview with Rahm Emanuel, I care a lot about the world and what's going on in national security affairs. So does my next guest, Philip Balboni, CEO and executive editor of dailychatter.com. Daily Chatter covers the world every single day, and Phil just told me that if you use the code HUGH, you'll get 25% off your subscription. Philip, we've added a number of new affiliates since you were last here. Do you want to tell people what Daily Chatter does before we dive into El Salvador?
Well, it's Global Post now, Hugh. I know you know that. It's just sometimes I revert to the former name, but Global Post is a daily newsletter that is exclusively devoted to the coverage of world news. We don't do anything else but that. We have about 400,000 readers around the United States and in about 100 other countries. We're nonpartisan. We just care deeply about what's happening in the world and trying to give Americans an opportunity to learn more about some of the important issues that are taking place.
Well, I appreciate very much giving listeners and viewers on the Salem News Channel a discount just for being there. Hugh H. Just use Hugh H. You'll get 25% off. And I always say at the end, but I'm going to say at the beginning, if you're a student or a teacher, it's free. That's on the toolbar of globalpost.com, isn't it, Philip?
Right. Is if listeners, viewers click on Global Education Program, it's very easy for them to sign up. We love helping students and teachers, have free access to the newsletter, and we have more than 14,000 now.
I love the maps because I know what you're actually talking about. In fact, we talked about the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda about 2 months before Marco Rubio brought home the treaty between the two combatant forces. So we were a little ahead of the news. Talk to me about your story on El Salvador today.
Yeah, El Salvador, interesting country. It's about 6 million people, about the size of Connecticut. Give people some reference point. It is the only country in Central America with no Caribbean coast, just the Pacific. It's been in the news because President Trump has sent a number of illegal migrants, deported them to El Salvador in an agreement with their president, Nayib Bukele. And they've gone into a prison which has become somewhat infamous, called CCOT. It's a very big place. It's a very tough place. El Salvador was really overrun by gangs, drug gangs, basically, and the murder rate had soared to a crazy high proportion. And the people of El Salvador were justifiably very upset about it. And when Bukele was elected president in 2019, he started to crack down. And the crime rate has just dramatically declined. People feel safe walking the streets of San Salvador, the capital, and other places. So he's been very successful in that regard. We wrote about that, but we also wrote about the human rights issues that people go into that prison and sometimes they never come out. There's a lot of issues that human rights groups have raised about it. The Trump administration doesn't seem particularly concerned about that, and they continue to have this agreement to deport migrants, illegal migrants, in the United States.
Is Bukele popular in El Salvador? Because I know from people who have told me who are El Salvadorian descent that it is safe again in El Salvador for the first time in decades.
Yes, we actually, there's a colleague who works at Global Post who actually does live there, and at least part of the time. It is safe. And he was reelected last year, 84% voted in favor of him.
Wow.
But he has changed the constitution of the country to basically be able to be a lifetime president. And he has become, by his own definition, a dictator. I mean, he's basically running everything without any opposition any longer. So, you know, as so often is the case in life and in countries, there's good and there's also bad. And, you know, one of the things for listeners and viewers to keep their mind on here is that in Central South America, there are a lot of examples of places where people became dictator, and it led to bad results, for not only for them, but for the United States as well. You only have to look at Cuba. More than 60 years of dictatorship in Cuba, and people are still fleeing the country, even more than ever because of the devastated state of the economy there. Venezuela, another example. Nicaragua, a third example. And you could go farther, but those are three good ones right in that neighborhood, if you will, where dictatorship can lead to problems for the United States. So I think we need to keep that in mind, but has he made the people of El Salvador happy by reducing crime, murder? Absolutely.
Has he stopped the caravans or the mass migration from south to north? Some of it comes through Nicaragua, some of it came through El Salvador, all of it goes through Panama. Did he put an end to that?
I think that is definitely stopped. I mean, of course, the president's policies at the border have, you know, had incredible success in stopping migration. The figures speak for themselves. I mean, they've gone down just almost to zero, practically. Yeah, the answer to your question is yes, he has.
So,
and he is working closely with the U.S.
Last question, Philip. Death squads used to be the bane of El Salvador in the 80s. Is anyone alleging that they are back, or are they just pointing at CCOT as being a maximum security, unpleasant, horrible place to be? But no death squads, right?
No death squads. No.
That matters a lot to me. That's where the humanitarian human rights issues become most pronounced. Philip Balboni, I want to thank you again for the discount you're offering my audience. Hugh H, 25%. The Global Post is not a sponsor of my show. I just like to bring Philip on because I think it's an invaluable resource. And I stress again, it's free for students and teachers to use in the classroom. Join the 400,000 people in the world who are smarter every day that they read globalpost.com. Philip Balboni, thank you. I want to talk to you about American Federal, sponsor of our market report. You can call American Federal at 1-800-221-7694, 1-800-221-7694, 1-800-221-7694. They sell gold, they buy gold. Nick Grovich and his team have been doing it for 44 years. And gold today went up again to $3,471 an ounce. It was at $3,320, so it's up $150 in a week. It went up $37.80 today, where the rest of the market was mixed. The Dow was down 0.5%, the S&P down 0.08%, the tech-heavy NASDAQ up 0.35%. But AmericanFederal.com, they're the best when it comes to buying and selling gold. Call Nick, that's who I buy my gold from, 800-221-7694. It's very transparent. It's absolutely clear. 1-800-221-7694. Josh Kraushaar joins me. He is executive editor of Jewish. Oh, it's next segment? Then let's go back to the Rahm Emanuel interview, part 4. Now, about Taiwan, Admiral Montgomery comes on this program a lot, retired Navy 2-star. He does a lot of work with Taiwan. They have ordered a lot of weapons from the United States. They can't get approved by DOD and state. Can you fix that if you were president? Do you think you could accelerate getting Taiwan what Taiwan needs to defend itself primarily, even with our help?
Look, I mean, Mr. Montgomery is much smarter than I am about what Taiwan needs. But I think if I read it correctly, I think they're like $12 billion or $15 billion. We're behind on meeting their orders.
Correct.
All right. So can you fix it? Yes, you can fix it. But it requires putting white light heat on the bureaucracy. Let me give you one example of what I mean. Japan produces the Patriot, Mitsubishi Heavy Industry. They make it. They have the capacity on site to go up to 75 missiles a year. They were making just a couple of years ago 35. Now they're down to single digits. Why? Because we can't get an agreement in the United States to get them the stuff quick enough and for the capacity to make the pay. So can they? Can we do it? Yes. The only way, and I spent countless hours with good people, both in state and Pentagon, trying to get this. You have to make a decision like on proprietary technology, the risk. It's not risk-free, but governing is choosing between bad and worse. If you want to get Japan, which is one of the only countries that can produce up to about 150 if they took more real estate capacity, right now on the existing industrial capacity 75. If you want that, you either decide that we're going to stay at 75 or we're going to go bigger, but we're going to make a different decision on the licensing of other type of technology. And you just got to make that decision. And that requires somebody sitting there and rather than committee looking at the same facts, year in and year out, we are going to make a call here. Either we're going to get to
Agreed.
X number, 1,000.
We're going to find something to disagree on pretty soon. Don't worry, we will. Let me ask you this. This is
the domestic.
I'm going to get there, but I got to do I always do national security on presidential debates, so I'm doing it with you. We have a triad. Which leg of the triad needs modernization first, fastest, regardless of cost?
I know this is not usual for somebody who has spent his time on national. I haven't read a lot on that particular question, so this would be an uneducated guess. Given the capacity of America's Air Force, I would say to keep the modernization of get the Air Force piece of that because of the globe, get that modernized first. But that's a really bad.
You're wrong. It's the Columbia class. We need the boomers. They can't be found, but we can go back to that. I want to switch to Israel.
Seriously, if you have something to read on that, I'd be very eager to get it.
I will get it to you. Now, Israel. Today, the cabinet is meeting. Indeed, they're meeting as we speak about whether or not to occupy all of Gaza. It is allegedly, reported in the Times of Israel, the prime minister's plan to occupy all of Gaza, beginning with Gaza City, and then to turn over a conquered Gaza free of Hamas to Arab troops. What do you make of that proposed decision as it's being reported?
I think this is, I would listen to the head of the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, of the consequences of what you have to do. This is, in the way I look at this is a byproduct of Prime Minister Netanyahu's refusal to have a day after plan starting 18 months ago. Now, if you look at the situation today, Israel has militarily succeeded and failed politically and strategically, and that sits at the Prime Minister's front door. Hamas, on the other side, has succeeded politically beyond what they expected and failed miserably militarily. They're mirror opposite of each other's. I will try to control myself here because I think the Prime Minister, if you look at historically, and we have he called me, we have a long history going back to 2009 when he called me publicly as when I was President Obama's chief of staff, a self-hating Jew, publicly. He has
so you get along.
Yeah, right. He has failed miserably.
Pause right there because it's a long, complex. We'll start with he has failed at the start of next hour. I've got to talk to Josh Kraushaar first. The entire Rahm Emanuel interview is already posted at my YouTube channel. It's pretty in-depth, pretty interesting to me. He's going to run for president. He's going to have the center-left lane all to himself with about a dozen progressives to his left and his far left. So, formidable character in American politics. You want to hear it. And he's talking to Megyn Kelly, he's talking to me, he's talking to everyone. Josh Kraushaar is editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. You can follow him on X at Josh Kraushaar. Josh, I spent an hour with Rahm Emanuel earlier today. I think you heard a little bit about that. We're about to get into Israel in part 5 at the top of hour 3. But I'm curious, I asked him, can a Jew get the nomination from the Democratic Party? And he said yes. What do you think?
I think someone Jewish can get the nomination, but someone who supports Israel, as the overwhelming number of Jewish Americans do, is going to have a lot of challenges. We saw that, Hugh, as you know, back in 2024 during the Veep stakes conversation, and Harris and a lot of top Democrats may deny it to this day, but you could see in real time the amount of overt anti-Semitism and anti-Israel extremism coming from a lot of left-wing Democrats. And all you have to do is look at the mood of the Democratic Party, the fact that over half of Senate Democrats for the first time voted on a Bernie Sanders resolution cutting off some key military aid to Israel. That's something that would have been unimaginable a year ago. I wrote about this in Jewish Insider this morning, but you look at some of these primaries in deep blue cities, New York City, Minneapolis, Seattle, and Mamdani and Mamdani types are actually winning Democratic nominations, or winning. The left is ascendant within the party, and they're winning these contested fights within the party. And you can see all the polling showing a lot of this left-wing dissatisfaction within the party, trying to take out the so-called establishment, and a lot of it has to do with support for Israel. That's been the mainstream position for a long time within the Democratic Party. So yes, like Brad Lander is Jewish. He's a very critical, very almost anti-Israel Jewish comptroller of New York City, and he would fit in with the modern iteration of the Democratic Party. But would a Josh Shapiro?
What about a Rahm Emanuel? I quoted him, the Pod Bros, saying table stakes for the Democratic primary in 2028 is cutting off military aid to Israel. And he rejects that out of hand. He says it's a two-way relationship. Of course, we're going to keep that relationship going. He's very critical of Prime Minister Netanyahu, Rahm Emanuel is, but you'll hear that, audience, if you stay tuned for hour number 3. But what about that kind of a Jewish American, Josh?
Yeah, well, look, I think Rahm has a lot of baggage that he'd have to deal with in a national Democratic primary. His work in the Clinton administration, his record as a moderate DLC type of Democrat for a long time, his vocal support for Israel, despite his very well documented disagreements with Bibi Netanyahu. But even big picture, the fact that he is a moderate, he is a pragmatist, he wants to get things done at a time when the Democratic base and the energy in the party is closer to AOC and Bernie Sanders. And I think the reaction is going to be increasingly responsive to Trump, and that means that the Democrats are going to want to, the base wants a left-wing version of Trump. They want an illiberal kind of radical to represent them increasingly. That's why Mamdani was able to win the New York City mayoral race. It's why AOC has been ascendant within the party, despite, her views have for a long time been well out of the mainstream of the party. And it's why Bernie Sanders is like the most popular figure in the party. I mean, there was over the anti-establishment left-wing space has gotten bigger since Trump won his second term. And Rahm Emanuel got in this, started to do a lot of national TV interviews, did a lot of interviews on podcasts before that break happened. I think that the resistance took a while to emerge in the second term for Trump. But over the last 2 or 3 months, you can see this anti-establishment left-wing mood has taken over the party, and it's scared the bejesus out of people like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries.
What I find interesting is that Ambassador Emanuel chose to talk to Megyn Kelly as well as Amy Walters, me as well as you. If you want to talk to him, he's going to talk to everyone and prove that he's fluent in all the issues. I think Run is the smart guy. We'll see. What do you understand to be the decision of Prime Minister Netanyahu vis-a-vis Gaza? The Times of Israel has some confusing stuff up. What do you think the decision is about Gaza?
Well, he just gave an interview before this very important cabinet meeting with Fox News, with Bill Hemmer at Fox, where it looks like they are, at the very least, going to go into Gaza City and essentially continue the war and to kind of double down on a strategy that hasn't led to a whole lot of successes in recent months. And they're also trying to, I think, as I understood it, they're going to rely more on the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and with American support to try to increase the amount of aid going into Gaza. But we know the obstacles and challenges that policy, that effort has faced to date. So, I mean, look, there's a real worry in the American Jewish community and in Israel, public opinion in Israel, that Netanyahu is kind of doubling down on a strategy that doesn't have a whole lot of public support, including among, IDF leaders, the head of the IDF. There've been some reports in the Israeli press that he has threatened to resign over disagreeing with the strategy that Netanyahu has been talking about and leaning into. So there's a lot of, Gaza has proven to be a real hornet's nest for, they've just taken out a lot of these military leaders. I think they've degraded the terror group's capabilities, but Hamas is still in charge. It has widespread support within the territory, and I don't think Netanyahu is eager to strike a diplomatic deal that would in some way try to get the remaining hostages home in exchange for essentially ending the war in Gaza and having some kind of security perimeter within the territory.
It's going to be fascinating when he comes out of that cabinet meeting, Josh. I'll be looking at Jewish Insider for the rundown on that. Thank you, my friend. Follow Josh at Josh Kroshauer over at X. Just Josh Kroshauer. You cannot miss it. I do want to remind you I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I've got my Relief Factor right here. They maintain my studios all over the country, and I appreciate it greatly. But more than that, I appreciate the fact they maintain me. They keep me going every day, and I take it in the first hour. Every show, you see me do it. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you hear me do it. If you're listening on one of our hundreds and hundreds of radio affiliates, and then I remind you in hours 2 and 3. And I wear you down, because it's not me wearing you down. It's the fact that you got a pain in your neck or a pain in your back or a pain in your shoulder or your calf or anywhere. And it's minor, and you take a leave or you take ibuprofen or something like that. You can't take over-the-counters. Some people like me can't take NSAIDs at all. Therefore, try the natural way. Relief Factor is all natural. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. 4 different pills once a day after you've got your levels up. But the starter pack is $19.95, 3 weeks. First week you take 3 packs a day. Second week you take 2 packets a day. Then, from then on, 1 pack a day. It works. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4RELIEF, or visit their website and look for that starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day, at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Coming up in hour number 3, part 5 of my interview with Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, likely candidate for president on the Democratic side in 2028. But, as Josh Kroshauer just mentioned, Prime Minister Netanyahu sat down with Fox News' Bill Hemmer today, Here's one excerpt, cut number 2.
We intend to, in order to assure our security, remove Hamas there, enable the population to be free of Gaza, and to pass it to civilian governance. That is not Hamas and not anyone advocating the destruction of Israel. That's what we want to do. We want to liberate ourselves and liberate the people of Gaza from the awful terror of Hamas. And you were in the Gaza Strip today. You met Palestinians who are fighting Hamas because finally they see that they have a future. They can rid themselves of this awful tyranny that not only holds our hostages, but holds 2 million Palestinians in Gaza hostage. That's got to end.
Are you saying today that you will take control of the entire 26-mile Gaza Strip, as it was 20 years ago to this month in 2005?
Well, we don't want to keep it. We want to have a security perimeter. We don't want to govern it. We don't want to be there as a governing body. We want to hand it over to Arab forces that will govern it properly without threatening us and giving Gazans a good life. That's not possible with Hamas. The only way that you're going to have a different future is to get rid of this neo-Nazi army. The Hamas are monsters. Look at what they're doing to our people. Look at what they're doing to the way they massacred, raped, beheaded our people, our men and women, burned our babies. And they are really cruel to their own people because when we try to take them away from the combat zones, they shoot them. They want people to be civilian casualties. They want a starvation policy that they themselves are trying to put into being. And we're doing everything to reverse that.
That was Bill Hemmer. I also want you to hear Secretary Rubio on Fox Business with Larry Kudlow talking about the upcoming meeting with Putin, cut number 10.
I think what we have is a better understanding of the conditions under which Russia would be prepared to end the war. We now have to compare that to what the Ukrainians and our European allies, but the Ukrainians primarily, of course, are willing to accept. And what you try to see is how far can you get these two positions closer? How can you get these two positions closer to each other? If we can get what the Ukrainians will accept and what the Russians will accept close enough, then I think there's the opportunity for the president to have a meeting that includes both Putin and Zelensky to try to close this thing out. So we got to get closer in that regard. But I think for the first time, perhaps since this administration began, we have some concrete examples of the kinds of things that Russia would ask for in order to end the war. We haven't had much of that to this point. Obviously, the Ukrainians have a say in this. We got to bring the two sides and the two positions close enough so that, you know, the ultimate closer, President Trump, can get involved and make it happen.
That is good news. That is very welcome news. I'll be telling you about it later tonight on Special Report with Brett Baer on the panel, so don't miss that. And don't miss hour 3 of today's program, part 5 of my interview with Rahm Emanuel, coming straight up, along with Senator Tim Scott on his new book. You just got to hear the senator talk about it. Welcome to hour 3 on this Thursday. Coming up later in the hour, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina on his brand new book, Under God Always. America always under God. America always under God. You don't want to miss that. And here is part 5 of my interview with Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, back from Japan, back in the game, probably running for president. Spent an hour with him today. We'll get the rest of it tomorrow and Monday. Here is Rahm Emanuel.
He has failed miserably in the responsibilities of thinking through politically and strategically the opportunities that Israel has achieved militarily. Look, my middle name is Israel. My father fought in the air gun, fought in the War of Independence. Never has Israel been more secure militarily from the days when Ben-Gurion led the Horah at Dizengoff Circle, when they were declared a state. They're incredibly secure strategically, militarily. And they're unbelievably politically and internationally more vulnerable than they've ever been. And it's on the doorstep of this prime minister because he refuses to make the tough political decisions because of his own sense of being held hostage by a cabinet that is divorced from political and strategic reality. The Israeli Defense Force has done, as we've seen over the last 2 years, having fumbled on October 7th and 8th and 9th, has incredibly reestablished not only Israel's military superiority, it's the credibility of its deterrence for future efforts, have done things that nobody thought could be done, both in Beirut, rather in southern Lebanon, in Syria, in Iran, and even in Gaza. But there has been an absolute absence of political leadership. And to literally since March 18th, when the last ceasefire ended, 50 plus Israeli soldiers have died for what? Military advantage. The highest suicide rate by reservists in Israel's military history. And those poor men and women, hostages are still underground in those tunnels with no greater strategic effort. And Israel now, rather than isolating Hamas, has isolated itself. And this,
you've seen the pictures of those hostages. You've seen the videos. They will die unless the IDF gets them out. They will die. They're going to starve to death. Should the IDF take the risk involved in going after them, and that means into parts of Gaza they've never gone before for fear of the hostages being executed?
The one thing I know about, as I said earlier, that I know about governing is choosing between bad and worse. I don't have all the information. What are the risks to the civilians? What are the risks to the soldiers going after them? What are the risks that they decide in the tunnels? Are they kept together? Are they kept separate in different parts? Israel has intelligence. I don't have that intelligence. I couldn't even give you a third grade answer to that because that's a question. That's a legitimate question that I would be guessing without a series of pieces of information over a period of time. But I want to say one thing. What is going on, for also an example of what I mean by the Prime Minister's absolute abject responsibility to the state of Israel and to the Jewish people and to the strategic position of Israel. To stand up there a week ago in front of the world and say there's no hunger, there's no malnutrition, destroys the credibility you need when you make other claims. And he has failed the one test of leadership that is essential. He failed the security of the state of Israel, and he failed to invest and take advantage of what military success does, which means it creates a void, an opening for political strategic chess moves. And he refuses to do it because of his own political calculations for his own security, and he's put at risk the rest of the Israelis' own future potential.
I've heard these criticisms from people like Haviv Reddy Gur. I've also heard Dr. Michael Oren make some of these criticisms, and I've heard Amit Segal give counter arguments. I am not an Israeli, so I just look at them as the equal of any of our strategic allies, and I'm glad they launched Operation Rising Lion, and I'm glad President Trump did Operation Midnight Hammer. Is Rahm Emanuel glad that both of those two things happened?
Look, so the first part, rather the second part on the Iran, I do think it was the right decision to do. They actually not only destroyed the nuclear, I think they actually degraded it, that it's incredibly costly. Iran's efforts for the last 40 years are now blown up from southern Lebanon to Syria, and also when the Israeli Air Force occupies and controls Iranian airspace. It's an incredible effort. I have some doubts about whether I'd make that decision as the President of the United States based on Israeli intelligence that's direct opposite of your own, to be studied and analyzed. Now the question is, what's the day after? And again, the Prime Minister has failed, both in Syria, Lebanon, and what vis-a-vis Iran, vis-a-vis what I mean Iran, for the rest of the Gulf countries, and specifically also with Saudi Arabia. For fear,
there's a good chance he'll be Prime Minister if you ever become president. Can you work with him? Because your old boss, President Obama, sure couldn't.
Well, I work with anybody. I mean, I could work with President Xi. I've been as critical there too. As you know, they went after when I was ambassador. They basically 4 or 5 times went from the podium, went after. I'm up front. You know where I stand. And could I work with them? I can work with a lot of components of the Israeli government. Work with a lot of components of both friend, foe, as ally, as well as not aligned. That's a responsibility. But I'm going to be clear about my position. I make the decision to do that. Now, as it relates to Israel's other pieces of its security, I have been supportive of that effort and consistently supportive. But you have to understand that the military is one piece that it creates a platform for the political and strategic to then secure. That is the only way you lock down. Look at this in the history of Israel. They have secured
Can
things
you
with. Oh, go ahead.
can you be that clear about President Macron's comments on a Palestinian state? I think that made him an accomplice of Hamas. I think it killed another hostage deal, and I think he's responsible for at least half of the 20 still being in the tunnels. What do you think?
I don't think he's responsible for that. The responsibility sits with what Israel did and didn't do, what Hamas did and did not do and refuses. Now, look, I come from the position Israel uses its missiles to protect its population, and Hamas uses its people to protect its missiles. Much different moral equivalents. They're not even equivalents. I think, I don't want to speak for President Macron, but my guess is there's some massive frustration that Israel hasn't thought about what's next. That's on Israel. There are things you have to decide and do, and I don't support the idea that you unilaterally call for a Palestinian state. You work for it, but you have to understand also, and I am sympathetic, I've worked going back to the Oslo Accord with President Clinton and President Obama. There's a belief that, you could have a one state, I think, but you can't have second-class citizens in that one state. That's crazy. So, like Rabin, not exactly a softie when it comes to Israel's security, understood the future. The other party, Prime Minister Omar, understood that the security of the future of Israel. That's why you try to negotiate the 06 agreement. Ehud Barak, at the end of President Clinton's background in 2000, at Camp David. Everybody, look, the Palestinians and the Palestinian leadership failed 3 separate times to say the word yes with 98% of what they could have gotten, 99%. So they own that. But that doesn't mean you are clean of your hands and you can say, okay, well, they failed. You have a responsibility.
Ambassador, there comes a point where realism takes over, and we're not going to get a Palestinian state in my lifetime because of 10/7. It's going to take a long time for the Israelis to trust another independently operated Palestinian enclave not to do what happened on 10/7. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, but here, look, I agree with that in this sense, but that doesn't mean you're done. There's Egypt, Jordan, and the Gulf countries ready to do things that they would never do 5-10 years ago. You have to make the first question isn't that. The first question is Israel's long-term security, and when I say long-term, I'm talking about a decade or two, in the present situation.
All right, let's go right there. We'll come back and do more of this tomorrow. It is all posted at my YouTube channel. It will be on tonight's podcast as well. Comments are already pouring in over at YouTube. I encourage you to watch the entire thing. I think Rahm Emanuel is very smart, and the ambassador would be a formidable candidate for president. And we get into redistricting and our political sparring a little bit later. I also want to remind you, I just check in gold because I'm so interested in AmericanFederal.com, and you can call them 1-800-221-7694. Gold's gone up since I first told you about it. It's up $50 today, $3,482. It's gone up $10 since last hour. I don't know what's going on in the gold market, but you should call Nick Rovich and talk to him about it. 1-800-221-7694, or visit AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. Pleased to welcome back an old friend of the program, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Senator Scott is the author of this brand new book, One Nation, Always Under God. It's completely surprising to me. It's not what I expected at all. Senator, how are you, and where do we find you today?
I'm doing fantastic. You find me in South Carolina, God's country, here in the low country near the ocean, a little humidity, but it's a good time to be at home for a couple days. I hope you're doing great,
I'm
Hugh.
very glad to congratulate you on the book. I want to start with the introduction. First of all, even though I was part of the debate panel that interviewed you and I did a lot of study with a lot of your surrogates, I had no idea how poor you were when you grew up. 2 boys and a mom in a bed. Have you ever talked about that at length? I knew you were raised by a single mom, but I didn't realize dirt poor.
Yeah, at the beginning of our time, especially when the parents separated, we moved back to real poverty. I mean, we had lived on dirt roads right next to a railroad track. The railroad tracks were about 25 feet, 30 feet from the house. It was so close. It was a difficult time. The house was, of course, full of love, but scarce for resources. And it had an indelible impression on my public service. It's one of the reasons why I know with great clarity that socialism corrodes the soul and free markets freeze all opportunities economically. And I think it leads to the greatest outcome for the average person in our country.
Well, if I were to summarize this book, I would say it is a clarion call for Christians to get serious about their Christianity and to proclaim it and, more importantly, live it. Let's go to the introduction where you say moral decay has been corrupting the soul of our nation. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if you look around our country, you look at the homicide rates around the country, you look at the homelessness rate around our country, you look at the single-parent households, 3 out of 4 African Americans, 40% of white working class have no father in the household. That's a devastating future for this nation. And a part of it is connected to this thing called values. Our Judeo-Christian ethos formed the foundation of this nation and led to amazing prosperity. Adhering to that means we have the greatest, brightest future possible. I believe that that is the path to the greatest future America has. It's getting back to this Judeo-Christian ethos that permeates in the soil even to this day. We just need more of that value proposition to be accepted and embraced by the average person.
I don't think anyone can argue with your assertion that, quote, the erosion of respect for Judeo-Christian values is not merely a rejection of our past, it poses a deep and imminent threat to our future. Won't you be called a Christian nationalist, Senator?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the difference is we never wanted to embed and or define this nation as a Christian nation. I believe that the philosophies that undergird this nation are without question the Judeo-Christian foundation. The difference is a specific difference. Our Constitution, First Amendment, really does speak to this notion of religious freedom. Every person should be able to exercise their faith and or the lack thereof. The consistency is that when you understand what allows that to be a truth in this country, it is because in the Bible we find that all men are created equal and given by their God inalienable rights. You find that very clearly from Genesis to Revelation. The key component is never do we find the desire to codify in government a specific church or religion. That is not what we seek. We seek religious freedom, but we must understand that the foundation of this country is a Jewish Christian one.
Now, Senator, in One Nation, Always Under God, the subtitle is Profiles in Christian Courage. And I'm going to get to a couple of them in just a moment. But you note there is a profound shift away from our religious foundations. I went to parochial school for 12 years, so I had good religious foundations. I'm sure you were in a Awana or in one of the Bible study groups of the South. You're Protestant, maybe a Baptist, I'm not sure. My wife's a Presbyterian. All of them are not doing so well. Why is that?
Yes.
Is that TikTok? Is that TV? Is it streaming? What's the deal?
I think the answer is yes to all three of those examples, but it goes further than that. Our society, and frankly, this generation of young people, they are hungry for something spiritual. It doesn't necessarily mean Christianity or Judaism or even the Nation of Islam or being a Muslim. It certainly means that they're searching for some identity in the faith walk. Some people idolize each other, some their bodies, some a very secular approach. But the truth is that we have a hole in our souls that can only be filled by faith. And that is what I have seen happen across our country. And President Trump, with his election, for somehow he stirred a hunger in the millennial generation. They are now the top seekers of faith, and specifically has made the Bible hot to buy again. We saw this downward slope, and now there's an upward trajectory for Christianity and frankly for faith as a whole.
Yeah, in the One Big Beautiful Bill, I believe Senator Cruz authored the provision, you voted for it, for $1,700 tax credit that goes to any scholarship granting organization. Will that be eligible for people who are, for example, running a Catholic school or a Baptist school or a Methodist school? Will they be eligible to receive those donations that are then a tax credit?
Absolutely, Hugh. They will be. I'll tell you the truth. That when that bill was first introduced as a standalone legislation, I was the co-sponsor along with Senator Cassidy. We were seeking a $10,000 credit, and it was whittled down to $1,700 in the one big beautiful bill. But think about it in a different light from my perspective, Hugh. The fact of the matter is that the Pell Grant for colleges, they go to private schools, Christian schools, religious schools, or secular schools. What we want is to encourage more education, higher education. Unfortunately, the people who are least likely to get a scholarship, the Pell Grant, are those kids who are doing poorly in school, high school, K through 12. Improving the K through 12 system will encourage more kids to become eligible for a Pell Grant. Pell Grants already go to every school, higher education, save I think 3 or 4 in our country that do not accept federal funds. The rest are eligible. Why not make the same footprint, the same width of eligibility K through 12 for government funding as well?
I'm for that. Now let's talk about revival specifically. 25 years ago, I was sitting in the office of Dr. Dobson at Focus on the Family, and he said, I was a younger man then, what we need is a religious revival. We haven't had one. We had like a little one at Asbury College and a little one here. Do you really think it's possible in this day and age to have one?
I do. I look at the kids at Ohio State University. Their football team led a small revival on their college campus that has been covered incredibly in Christian circles. But frankly, I think a different form of revival, Hugh, is when you watch men and women of good conscience, strong Christians and Jewish friends standing together for every child, every Jewish child on a college campus. I wrote the legislation back in 2016 to define anti-Semitism on college campuses. I really felt in my heart that this was something I should do. I remember the Jewish community coming to the South to help stand shoulder to shoulder with the African American community as we fought for equality here during the 60s and the 70s. I thought to myself, one of the ways that we have a revival on college campuses is to actually live out Proverbs 31:8 that says we should take a stand for those who can't stand for themselves or who should not stand alone. And so I've said,
stand by, Senator. I have to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about William Lloyd Garrison and Horatio Spafford as 2 examples of profiles in Christian courage. Senator Tim Scott is my guest. His brand new book, One Nation, Always Under God, Profiles in Christian Courage. Let's give them a sample, Senator. Why'd you pick William Lloyd Garrison? By the way, I thought I knew a lot about him in The Liberator. Turns out I didn't. I didn't know he was almost lynched.
Yeah, at Massachusetts, a really cool scene to play out as long as you're not a part of the scene and you're William Lloyd Garrison. Here's a guy who's fighting abolitionists, fighting for the freedom of African Americans during the time of the Civil War era. And here's what he does. He goes to a town. He's going there because he feels like he's been led to be there. He's fighting for equality, fighting for freedom. And there's a mob looking to lynch someone, and they hear that he's in town, and they're going to lynch him. He escapes, of course. But William Lloyd Garrison was a journalist who believed that it was his responsibility to do and report the right thing. He gave his life. He didn't die, but he was giving his life for a cause that could have literally cost him his life. I think today, if we have more Americans, ordinary people taking the extraordinary stand for causes bigger than themselves, we are moving this nation closer to a more perfect union. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to include his story in my book, One Nation, Always Under God, available at Amazon.com today.
My favorite story in One Nation, Always Under God is of Horatio Spafford, who I had never heard of before. Why don't you tell this story? Because it's the sort of grief. Baseball player named Andre Thornton played for the Indians, had the same thing happen to him. Lost his, well, actually worse than Spafford. He lost his entire family, but he was a man of God. Tell people about Spafford.
Yeah, let me say, this is such a gut-wrenching story. My father-in-law had to bury his son, and probably the most uncomfortable, unnatural thing to do is to bury your own child. Stafford literally had to bury a couple of his kids who were lost at sea. His wife survived. What a powerful story of what he did next. What he did next was he decided he would invest the rest of his life in making life better for other kids. He also penned a very famous now song, hymn in the Christian church called "It Is Well, It Is Well with My Soul." He believed above and beyond hope that somehow God would take this miserable experience and do something remarkable with it. We call that Romans 8:28. All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Incredible.
You begin
faith.
the chapter,
I'm not sure I could do it.
and he's in despair. So no matter where anyone is who's listening to this or watching it on the Salem News Channel, you can't really hit a lower bottom than Spafford hit. You can climb back from anywhere. Is that why you included it? And with God,
It is.
you can.
Yeah, exactly. With God, I mean, it's certainly you got to have something bigger than yourself. But if you think about the opening scene that I tell in the book, one of the things you read is here's a guy. He is. He's just, the anguish is so palpable. His experience is so real in his mind that he's literally having nightmares about the loss of his kids. He's running towards the end of the pier, trying to get his daughters before they are washed away. Night after night after night, this internal anxiety is just too small of a word. Anguish. Just he's being completely tormented over and over again, and he finally turns towards his faith. I won't say it happened overnight because it never does, but over time, he doesn't make peace with it, but he finds a resolve to do something powerful with this absolute abyss called his heart. Thank God he did, because he changed tens of thousands of lives. Frankly, I think he's changed millions of lives with that song, that hymn, "It Is Well."
Last question, Senator. The atmosphere on the Hill is allegedly very, very partisan, bitter, and divided. Is there a remnant of people who see each other as human beings and not as Democrats and Republicans, and who can pray together and work together?
Absolutely. I go to a Bible study on Thursdays and a prayer breakfast on Wednesdays. Believe it or not, 25 senators attend the Wednesday morning prayer breakfast, and it's Democrats and Republicans. About 14 and 8, 14 and 9 Republicans and Democrats. And then even in my Bible study, we have a couple of Democrats who attend. I have a good relationship with folks like Chris Coons, who is a devout Christian Democrat. We disagree on the vast majority of the political issues, but we agree that we live in the greatest country on the planet, and we are free to worship the God of our choice and work together on those 5% of the topics where we do agree politically as well.
Maybe make it 10%. Senator, thank you for joining me. The book is One Nation, Always Under God, Profiles in Christian Courage. Great Bible study, great, just something for your bedside. The chapters are not that long, but they are always powerful. Congratulations on the book, Senator Scott. Press on. I'll talk to you again soon in your capacity as NRSC chairman. Thank you for being here.
Look forward to it, Hugh. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleased to welcome back, as always, Jim Talent. Senator Talent served in Missouri for many years in the upper chamber, also in the Congress. He's a member of the Reagan Institute's leadership board. Senator Talent, Rahm Emanuel is my guest for an hour today. It's posted over at YouTube. I'll play most of it today and some of it tomorrow and next week. I am curious. I asked him which part of the nuclear triad needs to be modernized, and he admitted he didn't really know. What do you think? Should people have an opinion on that?
Yeah, if, as is rumored, he's thinking of running for president. Now, to be fair, it's a little bit early in that cycle, but he certainly needs to get an opinion. And of course, the answer is that all three parts of the triad are being modernized, and all three are important. And I hope he believes that if he does indeed run for president.
Well, I think the Columbia class is the most important because it's indestructible presently, or nearly so. Am I wrong in believing that?
Well, I would probably tend to agree that if we could only have one, it would be the subs, because they're very difficult to detect. But all three legs are very important. So the bombers give us a loitering capability and a recall capability. The ICBMs give us an assured second strike capability because they're spread out all over the country. And then the subs are undetectable. And so they're a real protection against first strike capability. So, but all three are important. Every time everybody studied it with a view towards getting rid of one of the legs of the triad, they've had to admit, no, we need all three. And that's before you consider what the Chinese are doing to build up their nuclear arsenal, which is way ahead of anything our intel services have predicted.
So, a political question. Do you think Democrats can ever nominate a Jew to run for president again or vice president?
Well, I'm sorry to say that there's a lot of anti-Semitism among activist parts of the base. It masquerades as being anti-Zionism or anti-Israel. So it's a real question. I mean, why wasn't Josh Shapiro picked as the number 2 on the ticket? They certainly would have done a lot better if they had. So I don't know. Now, to be fair, there are some anti-Semites in the darker corners of the alt-right that we have to worry about.
Sure.
But I think it's more institutional for them. And I like to believe and think they will eventually correct it, but it's a problem.
Now, I made the argument to him, Senator, that right now, if the Democrats came forward with a reasonable immigration reform plan, one that rewarded merit, one that was based on need, one that did not allow for chain migration, one that took care of the dreamers, maybe regularized people who've been here for 25 years without any violence in their past, it would pass. And he said it's up to the Republicans to do it. Don't you think if the Democrats brought forward a reasonable bill, we would pass it?
Listen, the Republicans are doing it. The problem they've got, I mean, it's less substantive than the fact that President Trump has occupied the center on all of these issues. I mean, I think if
Yes.
they went to Trump and, I mean, what the president is doing, he's mastered this. He does things that are very centrist. I mean, if you actually poll people, I mean, what he's doing for immigration is essentially what Clinton and even to some extent Obama did. It's just that he has to do it on a bigger scale because Biden let in 15 million people, right? But he's done that on issue after issue. Even the tariffs, which are the most controversial, I can tell you from my time in the Congress, tariffs and protective tariffs to help American workers was much more of a Democratic issue than a Republican issue. So the problem the Democrats have got is if they come forward with some abundance agenda or some centrist agenda, Trump is already there. And in addition, of course, they're going to tick off their base that wants them to fight everything. So it's a real political problem.
Are you alarmed? It's not just Mamdani now in New York. It's the Democratic nominee in Seattle. It's a probable nominee in Minneapolis who are running as Democratic Socialists. They're wacky, Jim. They're really out there. Do you think the American polity is ready to repudiate it again?
Yeah, I think if that brand for the Democrats sinks in, I mean, there's a reason they didn't nominate Bernie Sanders, because all the polls showed how much he was going to lose by. He would have lost by more than, Hillary did in 2016. If they become associated with that brand, they've got a problem. Now, you and I lived through this before you in the 70s. I mean, they weren't as radical, but they became associated with things like being very soft on crime, right? And Republicans won the presidency 3 elections in a row, and then they moderated in the 90s with the Democratic Leadership Council and Dick Gephardt, and then eventually Bill Clinton. So I think that will happen if they keep losing elections, but I don't think it's going to happen in the short term. I think they've got a
just wild crystal ball. Do you think Rahm Emanuel will do well in a Democratic presidential primary?
I think he might. I mean, what I suspect he's trying to do is to move to the center while rhetorically using his rhetorical skills and his political skills to recruit enough of the base to be able to win. I mean, that's basically what Clinton did, but it takes extraordinary skills to do that. We'll see. I mean, Rahm is an effective political actor. He's got huge problems, but I'm guessing he's eyeing the presidency. He has a lot of contacts throughout the party. So it would be healthy for the country if the Democrats were to nominate somebody who was more reasonable on these sets of issues.
A center-left Democrat would be a problem for us. And I asked him about his brother. He wouldn't quote his brother. His brother is a phenomenal fundraiser, not Dr. Emanuel, but super agent Hollywood Emanuel. He will raise the money. I'm just wondering if the Democratic Party would even consider a center-left guy to a classical liberal. Do you think they're still open to it?
Let me say this, and I probably should have added it before you. Until, and this would be true, I think, in both parties in similar situations, until the base is prepared to say, you know what, we have to moderate in order to win elections. The risk of moving to the center, if you're a Democrat, is that you end up alienating everybody. In other words, you don't get the people in the center, who prefer the fact that Trump has been doing it, the Republicans have been doing it and succeeding, and you demoralize your base. That's the difficulty you have when you try and walk up that line. It takes extraordinary skills to do it. I mean, Clinton had it, and we'll see if somebody else does.
I think maybe Josh Shapiro, Rahm Emanuel do, but they do have this handicap in this Democratic Party, not in the Republican Party. You can be a Jew in the Republican Party, but boy, oh boy, it's tough to be one in the Democratic Party now. Jim Talent is always a pleasure. Follow him on X at Jim Talent. The entire Rahm Emanuel interview is now posted over at YouTube. Dwayne is going to transcribe it, and it might make some news, might not. My nuclear triad question, I love to ask it, usually elicits some interesting answers. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I want to remind you, Relief Factor every day. I took it in the first hour. I remind you in hours 2 and 3 of every program every day. My new affiliate down in North Carolina. Everywhere across the United States. I really do take it because it really does work. It works whether you're just getting your miles in, going to the gym, doing your Pilates, jumping on your Peloton, or simply trundling or running at whatever speed you choose to do. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, omega. The starter pack is $19.95. $19.95. All you need to do is call 1-800-4 and the word relief. 1-800-4 and the word relief. Or go to their website, find that starter pack for $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. The website's pretty easy to remember, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. I finally want to close the show today. It's my penultimate day. That means second to last for the Steelers fans, asking you to please help Food for the Poor as they sponsor a campaign to help the people in the hill country of Texas. The banner to do that, totally tax-deductible contribution, Help Texas, is at the top of HughHewitt.com, or you can call 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. One of the reasons I'm angry with these Democrats who have bolted from Texas is being the special session, there is relief for the Hill Country, which was devastated beyond the 136 lives that were lost. That was a terrible and awful tragedy, and we talk about it every day, and we pray for the victims every day. But the river went everywhere, and it took out everything, and there's a lot of repair and ongoing work, a lot of volunteers, a lot of food that has to be delivered, a lot of aid that has to be delivered, and Food for the Poor is unequaled, or I should say they are the equal of anyone who's delivering help to that region right now. Food for the Poor, and your donation is safe. You can do it via the link at the top of HughHewitt.com, Help Texas, or you can call 855-359-4673. Now, some of you have been intending since July 4 to make that contribution, and you haven't done it yet. Do it today, 855-359-4673, 855-359-4673. If you missed the portions of the Rahm Emanuel interview that I played, I'll be playing the rest of it tomorrow, but it's already all posted at YouTube, and I hope you enjoy it because it's an interesting conversation with a very smart guy who I think is going to run for president. It's going to be an interesting choice for the Democrats because he's actually been a congressman, the chief of staff in the White House, the director of politics for the White House. He'd been the ambassador to Japan, and he ran a city for 8 years, Chicago, before it crumbled under Lori Lightfoot and Brandon. I'm telling you, he's going to be a formidable character on a debate stage, and it's fun to talk to him, and he's not afraid to come and talk to a center-right guy.